Dobry wieczór Państwu, mam na imię Marrcin. Co dzisiaj spróbujemy zrobić? Przeglądniemy informacje ze świata w podcaście marrcin.land, podcaście Marrcinland Podcast. Zaprasza Państwa na pierwszy odcinek Odwaga. Spróbujemy odpowiedzieć sobie na parę pytań. Jak informować się w okresie wojny informacyjnej? Jak budować zrozumienie otaczającego świata, aby zapewnić przetrwanie sobie i swoim bliskim? W tym pomoże nam agregator wiedzy Grand Theft World Podcast. Richard Grove, Tony Myers i cała ekipa dostarczają newsów ze Stanów Zjednoczonych, z mediów nie mainstreamowych, powiedzmy. Zobaczmy, co oni mają do powiedzenia.
Now, logging on to the internet looks like they are dealing with a whirlwind of a lot of significant troubles and issues, specifically when it even comes to feeding their own people. This is, again, not something unique to history. You study history, you could understand why some people are starting to become preppers, something that we have been warning about, telling you about, since of course these larger saber rattlings and destruction of global peace is creating a situation that is also creating a very bad financial one for everyone, as even The Hill wrote a very interesting article talking about, quote, are we witnessing the beginning of de-dollarization? Something, of course, that we have been talking about for a number of years now. This is a very significant threat, especially with the disruption of global trade, the disruption of energy from Russia, fertilizer from Russia, wheat from Ukraine, global supply chains being disrupted in China with, of course, the lockdown of 26 million people. What in the world is going on here? This met with, of course, a deliberate destruction of the U.S. purchasing power of the dollar that has been happening for decades already. What's going to be happening in the future? How will things work out financially? Will there be another sickness? Well, according to the man with man bazungas, yes. Very interestingly, the man with man bazungas is also the person invested in the cure and the organizations calling the shots here. Something, of course, that I would be just a little skeptical of. But that's just me. I might be wrong, and if you think I am in any way, shape, or form, please let me know down in the comments below. I always appreciate your constructive criticism. I don't always get everything right. No one does.
LD, we should have titled this episode Man Bazungas. But we didn't know. We titled the episode on Friday, and Luke just did that today. Otherwise, we would have had Bill Gates in the title.
Missed opportunity.
I know. Many such cases. All right, so let's rewind mentally for a second. They got people on lockdown in Shanghai. They don't have food. They're going through a lot of turmoil. Meanwhile, on the streets, the police have thermal imaging, pretending they're like the Predator from the Schwarzenegger movie back in the 90s, where thermal images, it's developed a hunt. It's a hunt thing. Okay. So they might be looking for your temperature right now, right here. They'll be looking for your temperature later when you won't go to their camps. Oh, we can see you in the bushes because they're just built in. And, so these types of things are not, it's not a good use of technology.
Burn down the forest, right? That's
when they keep using technology in the opposite way of freedom, beware, because that's a whole lot of slavery that they're making for people right there. And then the other part was he talked about the Hunter Biden laptop, some of the details going on with Hunty's laptop, and that Swiss guy, maybe they're going through the ones and zeros that are marked for deletion to overwrite but aren't actually overwritten, and they're pulling off whatever he had deleted, yet to be known. But that's a whole situation that if it was published when exposed, when it was there to be verified, they had that laptop for a year before that too, bro. Like that wasn't even like they just got it. They had been sitting on it. And finally, they're like, the FBI is not going to do anything. We have to take this to the public. Right now, granted, Giuliani's a sketchy dude. And when he's coming out that laptop, I'm like, well, this stinks. But on the other, broken clocks right twice a day anyway. So you can't look at the messenger. You got to look at the message.
Yeah.
And in the case of that laptop,
like you have to separate out the two. Like we know he has a shady past, but we have to look at the evidence in front of us. I mean,
I don't like him, but that's a real laptop. And so the scuttling of that story, the censoring of anyone talking about it, the clearing of that landscape is the only reason that you could have people believe that Biden was elected in the greatest popular vote landslide in American history. That's not the truth. Just like the Hunter Biden laptop wasn't the truth. So in the absence, if those pictures of Hunter and all that other stuff was known in October and the debates weren't, that's Russian propaganda, because that was Joe Biden's only defense. It's not true. These are lies. It's Russian propaganda. Trump, bad man.
Yeah, there's a bunch of fallacies
Trump
there.
might be a bad man. But you know what, Joe? You were lying. And now we're on the brink of World War III.
Joe a badder man?
We're on the brink of World War III with people getting starved out, quarantined. Next thing you know, end of civilization. Yeah. Because these guys wanted to bury the Hunter Biden laptop in October.
Correct. And let's not forget how Joe Biden was propped up by many of the globalists that we comment on internationally. So let's not forget what he's done since he's been in the Afghanistan debacle with his administration. You have the vaccine mandates, actual mandates, which I just don't see Trump going that far. Trump just was too much of a loose cannon for them to control. Biden is not really there, or if he's there, then he's feigning it unbelievably.
Plus,
or maybe
Biden's base supports the mandates. That's why they got
exactly.
Yeah,
that's why I think they really needed him to be in there. That, and he's also tied with the Ukraine and the Burisma deal and all that sort of and China. And
that's
he's
all in the Biden
perfect
laptop,
New World Order
too.
puppet. Don't get me wrong, Trump has plenty of shady connections as well, but he was so much of a loose cannon. I think they were afraid they wouldn't be able to control it as effectively as they need, especially to roll out their plans moving forward. They need to make sure they had their perfect puppet in place, and they got that with Biden. And that's why they had to squelch this story, and also mail-in balloting and all the various voter fraud allegations. And the audits have shown that doesn't really add up. But at the same time, we can't really talk about that apparently.
No, this is a good point, and we can't talk about that. You know why? Because they say you can't talk about it. I wouldn't talk about that because I have a stronger point to make, and I'm allowed to say the point I'm about to make. And it's this: Twitter, New York Times, Washington Post, Washington Times, everyone except the New York Post, let's put them on the list for un-American activities, for meddling with a democratic election, just like we prosecute people overseas when they do that to the other countries and stuff like that. That goes on. It went on here. We know who did it. They admitted it in Time magazine. And I'm not going after the people who counted the votes and all that bullshit they've been doing for the past 2 years. I'm going to point the finger and say, these companies that did this thing, covered up this Hunter Biden story. If I were president, you'd no longer be able to do business on American soil. Luckily, I don't believe in presidents, and being president is not something I'm into.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I'll lend that idea to somebody smart who wants to go be president, because that's how you have to treat those companies. You want to do business with American citizens on American soil, you're going to go by American values. They're written down in the Constitution and Bill of Rights. You might check in with that.
So in other words, what you're stating is we need another Reese committee on investigation on tax exempt. Well, these aren't even tax exempt foundations.
I wouldn't do Congress. I'd do criminal justice. If we have a criminal justice system, it shouldn't just be justice for the criminals. First off, right? Let's agree there. But since we got this Department of Justice and they want to do these things, I say that those companies conspired in censoring for the past, since I would go back to the week after Trump won, when Google had the crybaby meeting, and I would pick up every censorship case that they had where they all banned Alex Jones in the same day, right?
Now
look at who they're banning. Look at who they're banning in the past couple of weeks. Liberals.
Fallacy of the mean. Fallacy of the golden mean. Yeah.
Was it Chris Hayes?
Yep.
Getting banned, right? And so, and somebody else that Jack, what's the dude? Jack from Twitter? Dorsey just promoted somebody, like some YouTuber, and that YouTuber just got banned. So now it's like, even
that's why he was making the rounds. I was like, why is Jack Dorsey? Okay, because he's out of the Twitter sphere right now. I mean, he stepped down as CEO. So
these things have gotten out of hand.
That's crazy.
They're not going to get.
That's the fallacy of the mean. That's right. You keep moving the goalposts, and look what now they're cannibalizing their own. I mean, ever since the New York Times brought in the guy who covered up Jimmy Savile's pedo work for BBC and brought him in as their guy, I'd say New York Times is deep captured if it wasn't already by CIA before that. But it used to prop up some Americanism in the past. Now it doesn't even feign it. When I was spending time with you showed me a movie back from the 1970s called 3 Days of the Condor. Is that what it was called? Where they
watch that with Parallax View, and you'll think twice about being a whistleblower. But I saw him after I was a whistleblower, so I was just, do my
It's
homework
interesting
later.
because that sort of seems to insinuate that the New York Times was already captured back in the 70s by the CIA. Now that's just a film, but
No, it's written by Richard Condon, and it's the book form is 6 Days of the Condor, and it's about the CIA overthrow of Allende in Chile in September 11th, 1973. So that's the details on that. And then the other one to go with it is a Warren Beatty movie from like 1976 called Parallax View, where it opens up with like a Warren Committee review of an assassination, and they find that it was a lone gunman who did it. And then Warren Beatty's like this muckraker and investigative journalist, and he starts digging into it, and he starts following the trail of clues, and then sure enough at the end, the same thing that at the beginning of the movie and the ending of the movie is same. I don't want to spoil it, but it's not an encouraging movie to be a whistleblower or an investigative journalist and any of those things. A more modern version would be the Constant Gardener.
Yeah, Constant Gardener. Yeah, I was thinking about that the other day. I hadn't seen that film in a while. That's another good, tragic but good film to sort of explicate what's actually going on in reality.
Yeah, and the same people that are running those type of scenarios, they're at work in Ukraine right now.
Yeah,
and the poor Ukrainian people have no idea. And NATO is being used for first off, the countries in NATO are being used because an external agenda is using NATO to do these things. And then on top of that, Ukraine, all those people are being used. They're on various sides. They got various different beliefs. Some of them are neo-Nazis. Some of them are like Russians and stuff. There's all this stuff going on over there.
It's a big,
But as a political football, it is. And then they're kicking around for World War III to keep us distracted from the COVID until they bring the COVID back. It's like, it's a total puppet show at this point, and the strings are visible. And
notice what language they're using. The big talk this week, and really the past couple of weeks, has been possibly propping up, Poland with nuclear armament. Like, if that's not going to escalate that, and then that just seems like it's just talking points to me. Like they're sort of posturing, if you will. But at the same time, the fact that they're even considering that, and that there's so much hawkishness, especially from the progressive left, ironically, in regards to propping up the NATO states, particularly Poland and others, with nuclear armament right now, like that's a good idea. Instead of just sitting down trying to work out the differences and trying to figure out how we're going to, of course, what Zelensky has suggested is that they want to be a member state of NATO 100%. Like and he even stated back before this happened that it's going to cost us a war. In other words, we're going to have to go to war in order to get us into NATO. Well, that's interesting.
I mean,
so
I don't know.
There's a lot of very strange things going on there, whether or not they actually get into NATO.
Well, Zelensky's I saw the headline today that he's saying like Putin threatens all the countries in NATO. I'm just on the front line type of thing.
He's on the front. Yeah.
Right.
Sure. Yeah.
Like Putin. So I sense that they're trying to drum up Putin as Hitler, right? Because there's new 60 Minutes on Poland, and Putin wants Poland. And I'm like, Hitler, because everyone's brains, like in the back, there's like Hitler, Hitler wanted Poland, right? And it's
like
a westward expansion. You could then imagine just Russia gobbling up all of Europe, right? Because the EU is all one entity. So if you just take over that one entity, you get all these countries with it. Yeah. And I was like, is that the plan? Is that just what they want people to be scared of? Is this just, you have to discern, you have to compare and contrast. And part of it is comparing it to history and what has been done, right? Because there's been many Western forces that go eastward to try to go against Russia, and they always lose. And so at some point, it might make sense that Russia is like, you know what, we got a lot of Siberia. How about some more of Europe, to balance it out. So they have more like
arable land and like
arable land, cities. So I don't know, maybe that's on the agenda. Would that help create a new world order?
It wouldn't be the first time. If you think about it. Operation Barbarossa, this is such a strange paradox of history, but when Hitler went into Russia had already plans to go take over all of Europe. So in a way, he hedged them taking over all of Europe by essentially losing in Russia. But by that point, the Western forces, most of the allies, in other words, UK and America and Canada, had made its way into Western Europe, and we're pushing under the Eastern Front. So at that point, like, we were able to set up that sort of hedge, if you will, against the Russians being able to just completely run over all of Europe. So, and that was released, I think, by our State Department, realizing afterwards that's like, well, he violated the treaty, Hitler, that is, violated the treaty with Stalin, but it's like, no, they had plans to go in other words, Stalin and his regime had plans to completely take over Europe because we funded. We not only funded them, we provided them with the armament to do so. So he's like, well, hell, I'm just going to do it. And
they provided the Soviets with the stuff too.
That's right? What I mean.
They're
that's
like
they
these
provided
guys
the Soviets
won't fight
and the Hitler. with
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, they're like, we can't get these people to fight effectively. Can we arm all three sides and then see what happens? Because then it'll click off. So it's entirely
such a
possible.
Crazy
Stunning.
situation.
Stalin was a cunning enough person that he could have said, "Yeah, let Hitler do the heavy work, and then we'll just go in and take everything."
That's
we'll
what he was
jack 'em,
planning.
right?
He didn't expect them to. He didn't expect Operation Barbarossa. That caught him by surprise.
He's more the dude. He lets you rob the bank and then jacks you on the getaway.
Yes, yeah, you got it. Yeah, that's
because
exactly.
nobody'd be looking for him. Right.
That's
So it's like one up on the criminal scale, the predator that goes after the criminal that just does the thing. Right. The
That's
rookie
right.
criminals do the hard work, and the other ones, it's the layer cake, son.
That's
That's what I'm describing.
That's right. Yeah,
You haven't seen that film that tells you like it's the whole film's the criminal layers of the British underworld all the way up the layer cake. It's Daniel Craig. Right around the time he was becoming James Bond. That's a great movie. You can watch that movie 10 times and still learn stuff from that.
Interesting.
But this show's not about talking about gangster crime movies. We should have another show that talks about gangster crime stuff. All right, we got to get to Ukraine and Ruskies. And there's I don't have a dog in a fight. This guy from Ireland doesn't seem to have a dog in a fight, but he had something to say about it, because I guess we might have a dog in the fight. If it's going to be World War III and we're all getting sucked into it, maybe we should take a look at what's going on and start using our mouth and saying words and doing things while we still can, before they want to rain down some sort of thermonuclear Herman Kahnian Holocaust on us. Let's go ahead and check out this clip from Irish politician eviscerates pro-Ukraine warmongers and NATO. It's the theme. That'll kick off this section.
What's happening in Ukraine is what we've told you is that NATO and the United States is baited Russia through many reasons. This is more about fossil fuels and the controlling the economy than it is about anything else. And so we overthrew the government in Ukraine in 2014, which has led to this. So we instigated this. Who did? NATO and the United States. And by the way, we're losing. I'm going to do a segment on this Monday, but this idea that we can sanction Russia and it will only hurt Russia, it's not really hurting Russia. Russia's ruble is now back to pre-war rates. Why? Because they're making alliances with Saudi Arabia and China. They don't need the United States. And guess what? The dollar's tanking. Gas is $8 a gallon in Los Angeles. The United States dollar, being the world reserve currency, is going away, which is going to tank our economy, and they're doing it on purpose. So here is a member of the European Parliament, and Claire Daly, and she's talking to this guy. By the way, this guy was once fined by the European Parliament for doing a Nazi salute inside the Parliament. Yeah. So just so you know. So she tweets out, "War is peace. Blanket calls for more arms, more sanctions, more destruction are unweaving any chance of ending this war. Unweaving any chance of ending this war." MEP Angela Dzibanski fined one day prior, for performing a Nazi salute in the parliament, questions the morality of anti-war politics. So this is the guy, one day prior, was fined for giving a Nazi salute. She stands up and she says this to them about our involvement in Ukraine.
Onorevole Daly, ha facoltà di replicare.
Thanks, colleague. I would love colleague Jambaski to tell me any circumstance in which NATO has played a productive role or delivered peace anywhere. History has taught us that sanctions do not end military conflicts. They do not bring peace. They make the people suffer, not the oligarchs, the people of Russia, the people of Europe. And they're not going to help save lives, because the more arms you pump into Ukraine, the more the war will be prolonged, the more Ukrainians will die. And it might sound radical, colleagues, but the answer to war is not more war, it's peace. And peace isn't delivered by the barrel of a gun. It's delivered by diplomacy, by dialogue. You can wish away your continent's history, but we share a continent with Russia. We will sit down with Russia. There will be a negotiated peace, and this organization should be promoting it earlier rather than delaying it and making sure that more Ukrainians die. Your feigning of sympathy rings hollow. It makes me sick, to be honest with you.
Grazie.
So then that guy gets up and he walks out. Because what's he going to say back? Name one place in the world where NATO intervened and made things better. That's her question. Name one place. And so this is him when he left. Here he is leaving. Ready? That's him walking out. He gives the Nazi salute.
I always say bye like that.
I always say bye.
Yeah. Goodbye. I'm in the producers. Goodbye.
And so he's trying to say he was just waving.
See, goodbye.
So let's see. Was he just? So that was him giving the Nazi salute. He just got fined the day before for doing that. And he did it again. And that's his showing solidarity with the Nazis in Ukraine, which Putin is fighting. Go ahead.
How is that even an appropriate situation to wave goodbye? Like, if you're going to storm out, why stop and wave goodbye?
Yeah.
Exactly like a Nazi.
Yeah. Wait, I have to pay courtesy to the people I'm walking out on that I'm angry at. And let's just say who she is. Claire Daly is an Irish politician and self-described socialist. She has been a member of the European Parliament from Ireland for the Dublin constituency. Since 2019, she was originally a member of the Labour Party, but was expelled after being accused of membership in a Trotskyist group seeking to infiltrate Labour. She then joined the Socialist Party and won local office. In 2016, she was elected to the Irish Parliament as a member of the newly formed Irish Independence for Change Party. Sounds like we could use that in the United States. I think they're calling it the People's Party. And this is the guy she was talking to. Angel Jazbransky is a nationalist Bulgarian member of the European Parliament who was once fined over 2,000 euros for giving a Nazi salute inside the European Parliament.
In other words, the people NATO brought to power after the collapse of Bulgaria's communist government, who had always collaborated with Nazis.
And so we're in bed with Nazis, and people refuse to realize this or accept it. And they just, because they're told by Ali Veshi and warmongers on MSNBC and CNN that that's just Putin propaganda, that there's sure, there's Nazis in Ukraine, just like there's Nazis in the United States. No, that's not how, there's Nazis in Ukraine. Nazis are officially in the government. They have Nazi battalions officially integrated into their military. Officially, that's not. And of course, their slogan for their military is an old Nazi slogan.
Yeah. NATO is a Nazi rehabilitation organization.
Yes.
Always has been. It has been directed at the highest levels by former members of the Third Reich's military and intelligence services. And Western Europe has been infiltrated by former Nazis in the intelligence services, like Reinhard Gehlen, who took over the BND, he was one of the chiefs of the Gestapo. He just took his files, moved them over to the West German intelligence service in order to prevent people like Claire Daly, in other words, socialists, from rising to power in post-war Western Europe. And so you see she was expelled from the Labour Party. Everyone's been expelled from the Labour Party. If you say Palestinians are right, not subhumans, you get expelled from the Labour Party. So she and Mick Wallace, who is sitting next to her, I guess, our right, they represent the real Irish anti-colonial tradition, and they are holding it down in the EU Parliament, completely besieged on all sides by the far right and the center left, representing a true anti-imperialist perspective. And that's why they're there in the EU, which itself is just like a bankers cartel that has been overtaken by NATO. What is the point of the EU if it's going to be controlled by NATO? Because what is NATO? NATO is just the United States' Trojan horse in Europe to keep the Europeans weak and less independent, to keep Russia out, and to keep the West at war with Russia. And you see Europe suffering so much right now because of NATO and the EU subordinating its power and not representing Europeans, to NATO. Germany, look at the consumer prices. Just go into a German supermarket right now. Goods are good, like essential goods cost 50% more. They're going to face food shortages because the fertilizer isn't coming from Russia. The fuel isn't coming. They could have a very cold winter, and Olaf Scholz's government could collapse very soon, all because he cast his lot with NATO.
Why wouldn't the Germans stand up to NATO? So what's happening is there's a pipeline called Nord Stream 2 that comes directly from Russia into Germany, and Joe Biden bullied them into stopping that pipeline. And I don't need to go into it, but that pipeline has stopped. And so what's in it for Germany to do this to themselves?
Oh, because they're showing resolve against Putin. They've been showing resolve forever, showing so much resolve that they've pushed Ukraine and Russia into this catastrophic war, where Ukraine is just a staging ground for a proxy war for NATO. And one German government after another, since the fall of, especially since the end of the Cold War, and this transatlanticist ideology was adopted in Berlin after they moved the capital to there, has been just a tool of the United States. Merkel actually would have stood up more to the U.S. over this. She was demanding that Nord Stream 2 be authorized and filled with natural gas because it's so much cheaper to do so. And she has an obligation to her own citizens to heat their homes. Now, what are they going to do? Get liquid natural gas from the U.S.? Germany just announced that they can't possibly do so until 2028. They won't have the infrastructure. It's hard to get LNG from here to Germany. They don't have the offloading docks. You have to convert it to get it into the boats, and then you have to like reconvert it. So German leadership has forsaken their constituents, and German people are not rising up at this point. Where are the Americans rising up against NATO? I mean, record gas prices at the pump, which cause food prices to spike. That is what Biden is blaming on Putin. Biden's calling it like the Putin tax or something. I mean, okay, most people here don't believe that, but they don't have the context to understand that this is the result of a deliberate decision that Biden made, an imperial decision to make life worse for his own constituents. And where are the anti-war groups? I don't see any massive anti-war rallies right now. I feel like they're cowering. So
which anti-war groups should we be looking for leadership on this? Code Pink? I haven't seen much from Code Pink on this. What's that other anti-war? Is there another one?
Yeah, I mean, International Answer. I haven't seen much from them either. I mean, they can really bring people out in the streets. But
are they doing? Is the Answer Coalition doing anything?
I saw one of their local chapters had people hold up signs saying they're against a no-fly zone. And honestly, the no-fly zone's off the table. This is about a proxy war. This is about using our tax dollars to send hundreds of millions of dollars of weapons to extend a war that should be ended through diplomacy in order to carry out the goal that Biden articulated in his speech in Poland, regime change in Moscow, which would probably necessitate nuclear war. And I'm not attacking any of these anti-war groups. Like, I don't run an anti-war organization. But I find it odd that there are no major anti-war rallies to this point. There is one smaller one in New York. There is one group, I don't know how formalized it is, that is holding a rally this weekend in Washington, D.C., and it's called End the Damn Wars. Everyone who is against this catastrophic proxy war that NATO and the U.S. are waging that could turn into a extinction level conflict should go out to that rally. Look up End the Damn Wars. They're out in the streets in DC. People need to be out in the streets. I don't care who they are, really, within reason. And this is not just about, I would just say it's the perfect time for groups, whether they're Code Pink or End the Damn Wars, to help educate Americans on how empire harms them. All they need to do is put a little sticker next to gas pumps where the price of your filling up your tank shows up, because it costs about $60 to fill half of a tank of a car, like an average American car right now. And the sticker can say, courtesy of NATO, right next to that price. I mean, that's all they have to do. I think a lot of the anti-war groups are afraid because they're so committed to, this carbon-free future that they don't want to actually speak to the need of working class Americans for actual cheap gas to get themselves to work and pick up their kids from school. I think that's a problem within the anti. We should make those stickers.
We should make those. I'll make those stickers. Yeah, that's a good idea. I don't know how to make stickers. Where do we go? A sticker store? How do we make stickers?
Yeah, it could say Jimmy Dore.
Okay.
JimmyDore.com.
We'll make those stickers.
TheGrayZone.com. If I could make stickers, I'd do it.
Well, I'm going to do it, and then you can take notes on how to do it.
Go ahead,
because we'll do it.
Well, that's what I'm doing here.
All right, so those dudes, they need to figure out some sticker making. All you guys out there who know how to make these the stickers that I've been seeing around, contact those guys and offer a service. Next part. Yeah, besides stickers, there's a couple other problems to be solved there. But tell them about antiwar.com. Maybe tell antiwar.com to have those stickers and get them to Jimmy Dore.
All you got to do is march. Don't worry. This march in DC, it's all going to be fixed.
All you got to do is march and April and May in tyranny or do something other than nothing, right? Now, the first thing I'd say is like this whole NATO situation seems like a sticky wicket. The Nazis helped to make NATO, he's saying. We're going to have to look at that in a second. And then I thought, what other books do I have around here on NATO prior to COVID, and prior to Ukraine? What kind of knowledge do we have about NATO? And I thought, these two books right here on my shelf, these are easy to grab. So let's go to this first one. It's called Operation Gladio, the unholy alliance between the Vatican, the CIA, and the mafia. Might I also add MI6 is conveniently left out, but it's always the CIA alone because they thought of all this stuff on their own. Anyway, here's some secret army stuff right here. NATO's secret armies, Operation Gladio, and terrorism in Western Europe. And reading in through here to see who the Western powers brought about. I mean, there's a lot of bookmarks in here to see who the Western powers brought about as formulating NATO and doing these secret armies. You're going to run into a lot of Nazis, right? Especially if you're understanding anything of the grooming between the Nazis and CIA and MI6 and these things after war, and how they brought Operation Paperclip scientists and how they funded secret armies across Europe and conducted assassination campaigns and all sorts of other kind of skullduggery that goes on with NATO's secret armies, right? Now, let me go to the history blueprint real quick. Let's get to brain model, type in NATO, see if there's any Nazis that we can look at real quick. NATO. That's the treaty organization from 1949 to present. Coming on screen. All right. So let's see. A lot of British people looking for any. No. Looks like there's a lot of British people in the Cecil Rhodes Anglo-American establishment. But there's also the Odessa network, the spies. That was, I don't know if it was Galen's network. Let's see. Reinhard Galen came over. He was in charge of SS kind of Gestapo intelligence, and then he worked for Western powers. So you've got this whole network of spies called, if you want to call it the rat lines. This comes out of camps Ashcan and Dustbin. This is the American protection of Nazis. Dustbin is the British protection of Nazis. Ashcan is the American camps with protecting Nazis. Kissinger helped them go through back in if we went to the origin. So before you can even get into the Nazi networks that went into NATO and Operation Gladio, you have to look at the end of World War II and who was in charge of running these let's parse out the Nazis and take the ones we want to work for us in these bigger ideas, right? So you'd have Kissinger, Dulles, McCloy, Kennan, a lot of the usual suspects that were running over these camps. But you got people like Hermann Göring and von Ribbentrop and Klaus Barbie and Schwarzenegger's friend Kurt Waldheim, and then the Odessa network. There's a whole bunch of this, right? And this came out, some of it in the Rockefeller Commission CIA investigation of the CIA back in 75. But the knowledge of what came before NATO, how was NATO used as a front, and then if you go back a click back to NATO itself, and then we look at some of the things that have been done since then and who they affiliate with, right? So that 1993 toward a new world order, NATO and the future of Europe, George Soros document, like that was a pamphlet he made for the NATO meeting. He's sitting in that meeting. He has a say on the agenda, right? And then NATO was used like in the bombing of Yugoslavia when they want to do regime change and change some things around under Bill Clinton. NATO is the perfect thing. It's like it's like a coalition of the willing. Only the willing started signing on to this pact back in 1949. So long history. Here's that Soros, the future of NATO document. If you needed to reference that, it's actually on Scribd, but it's also on Soros's own blog. He has a website. He posts it himself. But the Open Society Foundations certainly has a presence over there in Ukraine that is a Soros presence. The 2014 coup has Soros fingerprints all over it, and there's meeting minutes. If you type in Soros, Jeffrey Pyatt, Victoria Nuland, Ukraine meeting minutes, I think it was like a 25-page document. You can go through and see each meeting and what the minutes were and the briefings and these sort of things. So to say that he didn't have a hand in that, so whether it's Biden talking about the New World Order in 93 and talking about it 2 weeks ago, or it's Soros talking about the New World Order in 1993 and then helping to fund a coup in a place where the New World Order is very active right now over in Ukraine, it's all part of the same history. It's all part of the same story. And it's interesting reading. When you get into a book like this, it's fascinating how the world really works according to the evidence, instead of going according to the history that you got in school or that is reinforced by the lamestream media. You know, crack open, good book, do a little reading every day. It's something that keeps ignorance away.
Kiedy człowiek zdobędzie informacje odnośnie tego, jak wygląda rzeczywistość, i oczywiście będzie dalej szukał i zgłębiał te informacje, to naturalnie narasta pytanie, przynajmniej u mnie tak było, jakie kroki podjąć, jakie realne rozwiązania przyjąć w swoim życiu i w życiu swoich bliskich, jakie im zasugerować rozwiązania, ażeby przetrwać to, co nadchodzi. I wielu ludzi zastanawia się, jakie podjąć kroki, więc chciałbym podzielić się teraz pewnymi spostrzeżeniami i pewnymi pytaniami, które możemy napotkać na swojej drodze.
The void. How do we fill it? Where do we find the strategist, the analyst that we need? Because this is where we are lacking. If we can fill this void, we can provide an agenda for leadership, hence a reason for leaders. Provide direction for negotiations so politicians, diplomats have something to present at the table at the various NGOs, Congress, and etc. The researchers, we can demand better research. We can figure out who's connected to George Soros, who's giving George Soros his marching orders. He, yes, feeds down to open society funds and feeds agendas, but he's not rogue. He has some society, NGO or something that he's in, that they're all concluding to a direction which is likely coming from a higher demand agenda from another higher body, committee or society. If we fill the void, we provide something to coordinate. We provide better attack strategies for the warriors, flyers, memes, ways to present it that makes it where we're using the same strategy. We're using buzzwords and different strategies that they use on us to also help awaken people. And if we provide good information, we can provide hope and understanding and build a support group where people are more swaying toward what we're saying than the propaganda of the media. We have great researchers, but they need to be fine-tuned to where we can look at what the battlefield is. And this is the first opening of my design for a battlefield. What does their battlefield look like? What is our battlefield? So our battlefield is going to be something like this, of individuals providing um, different attack points on their battlefield, so that we could have a chance of retaining some freedom and some rights. So that's what this is all about. So this is my project. If I go, I'm either going to go away June 1st, or I'm going to go all in. If I go all in, I'm going to be putting out about 40 videos per month. Most of them are going to come as conversation pieces that come from Puzzling Words. I already have like 500 of them. I just need to update them and put them in a new format, and then put out a small video on each one. And so that will provide me easily another almost a 2 years worth of videos right there. Tim Pool, Luke Randowski put out in their conversations, put out that if you're not putting out good content on a daily basis, you're losing viewers. They see you, and within a week or two, a month, they find other things that they're viewing, and they forget to come back to you. So even if you get 100,000 subscribers, you might only have 1,000 views for a video. So it's important to put out the good content on a regular basis, and that's what, if I go full in, that's what I plan upon doing, is providing this. You can pause it and read it. I'll explain this more at the meeting. This is the greatest war ever. They have their strategies, a lot of very things that they could plausibly do. This could be almost okay, we're under digital currency, digital passport, and that kind of stuff. Okay, so be it. Or they could decide, we need to rebuild the cities. Let's nuke them all down and let's rebuild them back up, like they did with the World Trade Center Twin Towers to the one, new thing that they got. To them, it's nothing. It's just a matter of, and killing 1 billion people is a matter of nothing, if it is for the good of the humanity and the planet, so they say. But as well as I do, most of the people up there are greedy, and they don't care how many people they kill as long as there's money for them. So we need to look at what we've got for information, what we can make for predictions from that information. The 2020 event was definitely everybody should have been saying they're planning to release that thing in 2020 to get rid of Trump, to kick off this whole thing. Anyone doing research, I had shifted to climate change, so I wasn't monitoring. I think I would have caught it because I was telling people in 2017 there's going to be a major market crash in 2020 because they got to get rid of that president they don't like, that they're building hate for. So we can predict things, we can prepare, we can come up with solutions and strategies, and that's what this is all about: is to supplement the research entities in a way that the research entities cannot do, because the research entities have to put out good knowledge. They cannot risk being iffy. We need entities that, when they say, well, it's looking like they're probably going to put out a pandemic in 2020. If they don't, then you taint yourself. That's why there has to be a separation between these two, between the people pulling in the data, the research, and the people that are providing the strategies and the analysis of what is going to happen, what we can do to reduce the loss of freedom and rights to us.
Mając świadomość tego, że nie wiemy wszystkiego o świecie, zaczynamy zadawać sobie kolejne pytania. Czy informacje, które do nas docierają, są rozumiane przez nas prawidłowo? Czy istnieje coś, co powoduje, że przyjmujemy jako prawdziwe informacje, które podane nam są w momencie strachu?
Attention is not just another cognitive function. Attention is how our world comes into being for us. The altered nature of attention can appear to abolish parts of the world, collapse time and space, and eviscerate emotion. It is a profoundly moral act. The world we experience is shaped by how we direct our attention, for reality is too complex, and we are too limited to attend to but a sliver of all that exists. Attend to one sliver of reality and we experience one type of world. Alter our attentional capacities, change what we attend to, and we change the very world we experience. It is undisputed by neuropsychologists and philosophers, writes the psychiatrist Ian McGilchrist, that the type and extent of attention we pay changes the nature of the world that we experience. This simple assertion has profound implications, for it means that there are many possible worlds for each of us to experience. Some of these worlds are conducive to a life well lived, others are not. In this video, we are going to explore the role that attention plays in the creation of the experiential world of anxiety disorders and depression, as this knowledge can help us overcome these diseases of despair. Chronic anxiety and depression can be caused by a myriad of factors, from biological predispositions to elements of our environment, to the influence of depressed or anxious parents, or simply a cruel twist of fate. The triggers are many and varied. But whatever the cause, once these forms of distress take root, they are perpetuated and exacerbated by a maladaptive way of attending to the world. To understand the attentional stance that drives anxiety and depression, we will begin with the analogy of the look versus the stare. For these two ways of visually attending to the world mirror the overall difference between a healthy way of deploying our attention and the way that perpetuates anxiety and depression. Consider the difference between looking and staring, writes Susan Sontag. A look is voluntary. It is also mobile, rising and falling in intensity as its foci of interest are taken up and then exhausted. A stare has, essentially, the character of a compulsion. It is steady, lacking in variation, and fixed. Or as the psychiatrist Louis Sass explains, the look is closer to the natural attitude of everyday life. Emanating from a secure base and rooted in the lived body, it travels within a stable horizon. It is natural, capturing reality as conventionally and pragmatically conceived. The stare, by contrast, is rigid and fixed. The stare is rigid, fixed, compulsive, and lacks variation, and so too is the attentional stance of depressed and anxious individuals. This is most obvious at the level of the psyche. For a healthy mind, it displays a variation in thought patterns. Sometimes the focus is on the good, sometimes the bad, sometimes the neutral. The depressed or anxious mind, however, lacks this variation and instead is rigidly and compulsively attuned to negative patterns of thought. The anxiety-ridden individual, for example, obsesses over potential threats and ruminates on all that could go wrong in life. Depression, on the other hand, is characterized by a selective attention and exaggeration of negative experiences of what is going wrong in one's life, rather than what is going right. This compulsive focus on the bad creates a narrowed experiential world, as the good in life is ignored and the potential for good is denied. But this maladaptive attentional stance is not limited to the realm of the psyche, for as Alexander Lowen wrote, since psyche and soma are like the two sides of a coin, head and tail, what goes on in one realm also occurs in the other. A healthy individual will attend to the world with their body in a graceful and spontaneous manner. Depressed and anxious individuals do so in a rigid manner. A stooped posture, a caved-in chest, tightened fists, a clenched jaw, all are reflections of the embodiment of anxiety and depression. And these ways of attending to the world with the body not only reflect the state of the psyche, but also magnify feelings of tension, anxiety, sadness, or depression. If a person has a strong and secure sense of himself, writes Lowen, he will naturally stand erect. If he is frightened, he will tend to cower. If he is sad or depressed, his body will droop. If he is trying to deny or compensate for inner feelings of insecurity, he will stand like a martinet, and his posture will be unnaturally rigid. In addition to attending to the outer world with a rigid body, and to the inner world with a rigid focus on negative thoughts, the behavior of depressed and anxious individuals is also rigid. Why move forward in life if each step is accompanied by catastrophizing thoughts in a body that generates feelings of tension, anxiety, and depression? Why take the risks that produce a fulfilling life if you believe you are destined to fail? Depressed and anxious individuals lack a healthy variation in patterns of behavior, preferring passivity and avoidance to novelty and the facing up to challenges. This rigidity in mind, body, and behavior creates a self-perpetuating feedback loop. Negative thoughts rigidify the body. A rigid body leads to increased negative feelings, and this acts as a barrier to constructive action. Or to phrase it in a different manner, avoiding normal modes of action promotes the negative thought patterns of anxiety and depression. These negative thought patterns rigidify the body, and these forms of thought and embodiment then further undermine healthy modes of action. Retreat from life leads to regression, and regression heightens resistance to life. To escape the downward spiral of depression and anxiety necessitates a broadening of attentional faculties to counteract the shrinking of our experiential world and the rigidification of our body. For the alternative is to descend into a stagnant and constricting existence, and to lose contact with a healthy flow of life. Whenever an individual's sense of the flow of life has come to a stop or been frozen, that person can no longer realize himself, no longer mature, and will lose the capacity to make emotional contact with others. But how can we achieve this task when stuck in patterns of thought, embodiment, and behavior that all feed upon each other and pull us further down into despair? In the final video of this series, we will explore this question. To find the richest view of the world, writes McGilchrist, the one that seems truest to the world as a whole, in the sense that it resonates with our experience in the richest way, the imaginative exercise of inhabiting a number of points of view is required. Learn more about our membership, access transcripts, and the art we use in the videos by visiting academyofideas.com.
Last week, D.C. Metropolitan Police recovered the remains of 5 late-term preborn children from the Washington Surgery Clinic in Washington, D.C. Based on the evidence collected at the time of recovery and photos that have been publicly shared, all 5 of these children appear to have developed well past the point of viability and likely suffered severely painful abortion procedures. For example, one baby girl has significant damage to her head with deep lacerations at the back of her neck, and may have been a victim of an illegal partial abortion. Another baby was found in its amniotic sac and could have been born alive. There are images documenting this crime, but I won't show them to you as they're so disturbing and graphic that only a feminist and possibly Satan himself could stomach them. Now, to make matters worse, this discovery came just as a new bill was introduced in California to legalize infanticide. To be more specific, the bill shields a mother of civil and criminal charges for any actions or omissions related to her pregnancy, meaning a mother can abort her baby at any point during her 9 months of pregnancy, and if the baby's born alive, it's within her legal rights to leave it to die. In fact, according to the intentionally vague language used in this bill, she can't be criminally prosecuted in any instance where the baby's death was a result of failure to act. I guess this is the cute new terminology we're using for fatal neglect. I can't say I'm surprised by any of this because the moment I hit the upload button on this video, I'm gonna have hundreds of DMs and comments from disgruntled Katie Lang impersonators telling me that I'm a hypocrite because I can't be anti-mandate and pro-life at the same time. Now, I have to disagree there. I don't think it so much makes me a hypocrite as it makes you incapable of comprehending the definition of words. First of all, to support abortion is not to support bodily autonomy, for one very obvious reason. A baby is not your body. A baby is an individual with its own separate head, shoulders, knees, toes, and unique DNA. So to support the murder of these individuals is quite literally the opposite of supporting bodily autonomy. Secondly, the problem with this argument is that you're confusing an action to an inaction. Bodily autonomy means the right to govern your own body without force or coercion, and there's no force involved in birthing a child, because giving birth is the natural outcome of getting pregnant. You can't force a woman to give birth any more than you can force her to take a shit. Comparing mandates to abortion is like saying, hey, you coming into my house and shooting my wife in the fucking head is the exact same thing as you refusing to come into my house and shoot my wife in the fucking head. In other words, another individual's human rights are completely dependent on whether or not I find them valuable, which the last time I checked, granting human rights based on that individual's perceived value in society is exactly why we have anti-discrimination laws in the first place, so that the voiceless and oppressed are protected. To drive home how asinine this perspective on a baby's human rights is, I want you to consider this. When a doctor murders an unborn baby, we call that a choice. But when a criminal murders a pregnant woman, we charge him with double homicide. Now, of course, the masterminds behind the grossly profitable abortion industry, who constructed these half-baked arguments and later convinced generations of women to parrot them, are well aware of everything I just said. And they're also aware that none of their arguments hold any water unless they take one very important step: change the definition of words. In order to minimize the life of an unborn child, we must first deny that the unborn are human at all. So we'll call them fetuses or clumps of cells, whatever detracts from the fact that they're human beings just like you and I, at a different stage of development. Once you've accomplished that, you'll find even the most devout Christians celebrating abortion for so-called advances in science. And this is why I continue to preach about the importance of words. Because not only do we use words to share information, words construct our very thoughts and ideas. We can soften the worst atrocities in human history with words. War can be reduced to foreign relations, and murder can be reduced to a simple medical procedure. The war on words is relentless and intentional, and it's oozed into every vulnerable crack of Western culture like toxic sludge. And what's its mission? To replace objective reality with subjective experience. Because without objective truth, there's no ground for morality to stand on. And without morality, tyrants can turn entire generations of average citizens into obedient soldiers. And why not get your foot in the door with society's most innocent members? Because if a woman can stand by and watch a stranger in a white coat slaughter her own flesh and blood, what could she stand by and watch him do to you?
The New York Post censored from Twitter from reporting on this accurately. And this is, again, why we are building up our own infrastructure, our own website, our own platform. We do that all exclusively.
You might want to imagine that had you lived under the famously oppressive regimes of the past, under Mao, Stalin, Hitler, Mussolini, and so on, that you would have been among the resistance, that you would have been on the side of truth, justice, and freedom. But statistically speaking, that's probably not true. Had you lived in those places in those times, it's quite likely that along with a majority of your neighbors, you would have been proudly and loudly supporting and enthusiastically cheering for those oppressive authoritarian regimes. Now, you might disagree. Not you. You would have been virtuous, brave, and principled, right? Well, keep in mind, those oppressive regimes didn't just declare one day that they would be terrorizing, torturing, and murdering innocent people. Quite the opposite. Even the most vicious tyrants claimed that what they did was for the common good, was necessary for law and order, and to protect the people. And many believed it. Real-world tyrants aren't comic book villains. Most people don't even recognize them as tyrants until it's too late. Those historical tyrants, they were all cheered on by huge numbers of people, well-intentioned people who saw themselves as the good guys and saw the disobedient scofflaws and rebels as the bad guys and deserving of whatever punishment the state might impose upon them. Dictators and tyrants, before they crack down on dissidents and resistors, always need to portray the disobedient as selfish criminals, as enemies of the people, as a threat to society. Meanwhile, the loyal, obedient subjects are told that they are the virtuous, intelligent, caring, and compassionate ones, the ones nobly sacrificing for the common good, being responsible, upstanding citizens by going along with whatever the political ruling class tells them to do. The masses have always been told by officials and experts of the state that a very real danger was threatening their country, their people, their way of life, their very existence. And they were told that the only solution was more authoritarian control. And they were told that any who doubted such fear-mongering or didn't approve of the authoritarian solution were just ignorant, uncaring, mentally unstable, or worse, that the disobedient were trying to harm the decent, good, law-abiding citizens. To get away with doing what they do, tyrants need their adoring masses to condemn and hate the disobedient, condemning the motives of any who don't fall in line. The resistors are always painted by the state as greedy and ignorant malcontents who don't care about others, don't care about their country, only care about themselves, endangering everyone else with their disobedience and rabble-rousing. Those in power can't have the masses even considering the possibility that the people disobeying and resisting also have good intentions and good reason for disobeying, that they care just as much, that they too are trying to do the right thing. No, the dissidents always have to be portrayed as stupid, irresponsible, or downright evil. The tyrants can never let dissenters be seen as good people with just an honest difference of opinion. So to avoid that, those in power go to great lengths to vilify, censor, and silence any and all opposing opinions. So the masses don't ever hear why those other people believe and behave differently. Because if the people were exposed to competing ideas, they might change their minds. So any skeptics or critics of state power have to be demonized, painted as callous villains. Their beliefs have to be mischaracterized, and their intentions have to be maligned. And most people who lived under those regimes, having spent so much of their lives subjected to authoritarian indoctrination, didn't have the thinking skills or the mental fortitude to even begin to question what they were told by the authorities. They had been taught to believe that government knows best and that it's there to protect the people. And even if those people had the ability to assess things objectively, which they didn't, the masses would never actually hear an open, honest public discussion or debate anyway. Those in power made sure the masses would constantly hear only the officially sanctioned viewpoint broadcast everywhere and at all times. As for any differing views, all the masses would ever hear was, those people don't care. Those people are selfish, ignorant, crazy, evil, not worth listening to. And for the good of the people, all those dangerous, misguided, dissenting views must be silenced. Even in supposedly advanced, well-educated countries, the masses have often been ignorant cowards, unable to think for themselves. And of the few who did have their doubts, most didn't dare to do or say anything to actually resist the lies and the injustice. And their excuse was, well, they couldn't afford to speak out, to make waves. They had too much to lose. So most people just followed along, acting like well-trained dogs, eager to please their masters. And having been subjected to prolonged and intense propaganda, coercion, and manipulation, most of those who obeyed those regimes, who voted for those regimes, who empowered those regimes and cheered for those regimes, felt completely justified and morally virtuous and superior based on their compliance with the commands of their political rulers. They felt deep pride in their subservience and deep contempt for any who did not share their blind faith and their blind obedience. And so, as a result, the worst tyrants in history were widely adored and cheered for, even by the very people that the tyrants ended up abusing. Among so many well-intentioned but duped populations, authoritarian agendas have been wildly popular, while resistors have been few and far between, scorned and despised by the majority. But even with all of that in mind, is it really fair for me to suggest that a lot of you, had you lived under those tyrannical regimes, wouldn't have been on the side of truth and justice, but instead would have been loyal, brainwashed cheerleaders for sadistic megalomaniacs? Is it fair for me to think that you would have been so gullible, so weak-minded, so unprincipled, that you would have fallen for the classic divide and conquer and fear-mongering tactics of power-happy sociopaths, to the point that even you would have zealously supported the oppression and victimization of your fellow man, and self-righteously condemned any who resisted or objected to such oppression? Well, yes, I think that is fair. Because that's exactly what I've watched a lot of you do for the past 2 fucking years. You know who you are. You're the ones who blindly believed and obeyed those in power and condemned anyone who didn't. You're the ones who didn't research anything, didn't question anything, didn't look at any actual data. Instead, you fell for ridiculous fear-mongering, and then you repeated it, and you despised anyone who didn't. You jumped on the bandwagon and then felt virtuous, mindlessly accepting and pushing an insane and destructive authoritarian agenda. You know who you are. And even though the power-happy psychopaths whose boots you've been licking all this time have been caught lying over and over and over again, you still mindlessly label anyone who doesn't bow and kiss the ring as a purveyor of misinformation. You hate whomever those in power tell you to hate without bothering to listen to a word they say. Even when the government lies are obvious, the fear-mongering is obvious, the actual conspiracy is glaringly obvious, not even hidden, you still deny it, and you still attack anyone stating the truth. And you tell yourself that it's because you care more, because you're more enlightened, you're more responsible. But that is a lie. You did it because you were scared, you were ignorant, you were gullible, and you were obedient, and you tried to pass that off as virtue. It was easier and felt safer to you to believe whatever you thought the majority believed, rather than having to actually think for yourself. And as others tried to counter the obvious lies, and counter the ridiculous fear-mongering, and counter the psychotic power grabs, it was easier for you to just decide that those people didn't care as much as you, weren't as informed as you, weren't as responsible as you. You followed the crowd without spending one moment trying to find the truth. You kept clinging to the utterly asinine notion that the dictates and mandates from the political parasites were about safety, health, and protecting the people. You cheered for more authoritarian control to the detriment of the freedom and health and safety of everyone you know. Because your feelings mattered more to you than the truth, and mattered more to you than your fellow man. Deep down inside, I think you knew that. You were just too much of a spineless coward to do anything else. No matter how many times the political opportunists were caught lying, no matter how many times they were proven wrong and had to change their story and contradict themselves, and no matter how many times the people who you scorned were proven right, you didn't have the brains, the spine, or the honesty to admit that you were wrong. That your obedience didn't protect anyone or make anyone safer. That your compliance didn't make you more caring and virtuous. It only made you a useful idiot who could be used as a pawn by power-happy lunatics. You kept mindlessly repeating whatever lines the talking heads fed you, talking about trusting the science while being utterly and intentionally clueless about the actual science and data. You enjoyed self-righteously lecturing others about how they too should mindlessly believe and obey political liars and crooks the way you do. It gave you a feeling of belonging and moral superiority to be part of a crowd of well-trained sheep, believing and obeying whatever ridiculous crap the state propagandists spewed at you day after day. You tried so hard to tell yourself that obeying tyrants and hating anyone who didn't made you informed and compassionate. So yes, if you're one of the ones I've been describing here, you are exactly the type that supported all of those historical tyrants, taking great pride in their blind obedience, delighting in condemning and attacking any who had the brains and the courage to actually question things, to speak out, and to disobey the insane and deadly authoritarian agendas. And now, as the truth is coming out all over the place, what you will probably do is get very quiet and hope that no one remembers how you supported and repeated the lies. You supported the destructive dictates and restrictions that destroyed millions of lives. You hope people will forget that you were a cheerleader for authoritarian evil. So if you want to deny that you would have done the exact same thing had you lived in those other times, in those other places, then maybe right here and right fucking now, you should stop empowering the worst people in the world. Admit you were wrong. Admit you were deceived. Admit that you helped cheer for immoral and destructive authoritarian coercion and injustice, that you helped push the agenda of megalomaniacs and murderers. And don't pretend that your supposed good intentions are a valid excuse for what you were part of, for what your compliance helped make happen. Unless you think that those who empowered those other murderous regimes in history should get a pass as long as they meant well. And once you've acknowledged what you did, then stop being an apologist for political psychopaths. Until you do, you don't deserve the respect and compassion of your fellow man. You've acted as an enabler of evil. Until you admit your mistake and change your words and your behavior, you don't deserve to be trusted or listened to. You don't deserve forgiveness. Like all the others in history who empowered dictators and tyrants, until you do what you can to correct your mistake, you deserve contempt and condemnation for the massive pain and suffering that you helped to create. And some of us won't forget.
To był epizod pierwszy, Marrchin Land Podcast. Dziękuję Ci, że pozwoliłeś sobie na zapoznanie się z tymi wszystkimi informacjami i mam nadzieję, że Twój czas został wzbogacony. A teraz zapraszam do komentowania, dzielenia się tymi informacjami. Do następnego. Zapraszam do następnego odcinka.
Jest jeden wielki mechanizm, nieskończony. Jedno odbicie we wszystkich. Jedna cząstka mocno odczuwalna. Jedyny cud na tym polega. Świadomość twa, o tym tu mowa. Nieważne skąd, nieważne dokąd. Jedyny cud na tym polega. Wizje przypadkowości, wizje wypadkowości. Jeszcze nic się nie stało, ale zaraz mało brakowało. Powodzenia, szerokiej drogi. Apokaliptyczna wizja nie ułatwia się drogi. Powodzenia, szerokiej drogi. Apokaliptyczna wizja nie ułatwia się drogi. Właśnie ta chwila szczęścia przejawem jest. Piękna, szykowna, niepowtarzalna też. Jedna wielka, monstrualna sieć. Psychoemocjonalna, nieskazitelna więź. Jedna